Hi, I'm Carrie.
And I'm Kayla, and you're listening to the Cheat Sheet Speech podcast, where two pediatric speech-language pathologists talk about how to build communication in your everyday routines.
Yes, before we dive in, just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice. If you have concerns about your child's communication, we recommend that you seek an evaluation from a pediatric speech-language pathologist that is licensed in your state. Alrighty.
Okay, so Halloween is coming. Costumes, candy, maybe even like a little chaos.
Yes, but it doesn't have to be spooky. Today, we're going to talk about all things Halloween, how to prep for the holiday to help your child feel prepared, support that communication during trick-or-treating, and just make the night fun and inclusive for everybody.
Yes, and whether your kid loves Halloween or it gets a little overwhelmed by it, today's podcast, we will chat about practical tips to help your family feel ready and excited.
I love it. Halloween is a holiday that involves a lot of transitions in language. So there's a lot to dive into here. But first, let's start with preparation. We always say that previewing and practicing helps kids feel more confident, right?
Absolutely. Halloween is full of lots of new experiences like putting on a costume, decorating, noises, and that can be exciting, but also very overwhelming. So what might previewing look like?
Yeah, so as usual, I feel like my first thought is to just introduce a visual to help the child just start understanding what the holiday is and what to expect. Start building vocabulary around that holiday. So this could be a book about Halloween or coloring a picture of a Halloween scene, hiding Halloween objects around the room, or maybe watching a Halloween episode of their favorite show.
Yes, exactly. Helping them build the vocabulary now can create confidence to use that vocabulary later.
Yes, and when those vocabulary words are used, then they become familiar, making the child just feel more comfortable during that experience. How else could we prep for Halloween?
Yeah, well, Halloween does involve a lot of new language, from communicating like trick or treat to understanding the direction of like you have to hold the bucket while they hand you the treat. So I would start modeling these key phrases so that your child could become more familiar with them. Of course, your child does not have to use these exact phrases on Halloween, but at least modeling them can provide them the space to try to say it, like modeling trick or treat.
Right. I like to set up pretend play scenes starting like beginning of October. Don't like to do it too early because some people really push fall early, you know. But with my learning, I have learning resources, houses, the farm ones, and then I'll just have the animals knock on each door and say trick or treat. I actually have these mini pumpkin trick or treat baskets. So they just knock on each house, and then the animal that lives in the house might say, do you want candy or chocolate? So this is just a great way to model what might happen during that Halloween experience. And just for me as a speech language pathologist or other SLPs out there, just target those communication goals in a fun, engaging way.
Yes, that's perfect. I love doing it with those houses. I do that type of thing in my session as well. We also, as a clinic, we will go over to other therapist stores and we practice trick-or-treating. It's a great way to practice language. So we knock on the door and then we already have prize buckets in each room and we practice that exchange with either the other student that might be in there or the therapist. So I love to make sequencing strips too for like the sequence of events that might happen in trick-or-treating. So it might look like put on a costume, go outside, knock on the door, trick-or-treat, get candy, thank you.
I love that idea. Then the child can really see the steps involved in Halloween, and it breaks down that experience into chunks rather than this just Halloween, this ominous moment, and I don't really understand what's going to happen. Now I can see these steps of what's going to happen next and what really goes on during this experience that people keep referencing.
Right. It doesn't feel so abstract. It helps you see the steps that are involved in Halloween, breaks it down into the chunks instead of like one big moment. And then sometimes I even bring the schedule with them. This way it can help take them through the events of Halloween. Another tricky part of Halloween can be the costume.
Yeah. So not every day that we wear costumes. So this can be novel or an overwhelming experience for little ones.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's always good to try on the costume before. Mm-hmm. I do have some patients that have already started wearing their costume to speech.
Yes.
So
yes.
They're ready. They're ready to go.
Very excited.
If your child's not like that quite yet, trying to get the costume early, try it on. And then this way you can also model the language around it. That's a great opportunity to expose them to some vocabulary like, oh, the dress is soft, or it's a big pumpkin. They'll be more comfortable with the costume and the language around it.
I love that idea because it just gets the child excited about wearing it. I find when you describe something, then they're like, oh yeah, it is soft. Oh, this is cool. I do look like a princess, or I do look like a raccoon. So that will reduce that stress because they've seen it, they're familiar with it, they can talk about it, and they've worn it before.
Yeah, exactly. You're building that vocabulary around Halloween. You can practice the trick-or-treating and pretend play and trying on your costume before, all great ways to prepare for the holiday. So how might we support communication for our kids during Halloween?
So Halloween involves so much language. So there's just a lot of opportunities to support your child's communication. Mm-hmm. First, I think it's just important to remember that it's okay if your child does not adhere to these rules of Halloween, right? These communication rules. They don't have to say trick or treat.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this experience might not go how you expect, and it's okay if your child only goes to one house. Mm-hmm. It's important to recognize that every child is different, so their communication might look different. So we're just making sure that we meet our child where they're at to empower their communication.
Right, and that might look like providing access to their communication modality at this time. So that could be modeling single words, using gestures, sign, pictures, AAC device, anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and providing them with language opportunities based on their preferred language modality. So, for instance, I might add specific vocabulary to my child's AAC device depending on their costume, or if they have like a preferred phrase that they like to use to support their communication during trick-or-treating.
I love that. Individualizing AAC just helps increase engagement in that activity. I've also heard of families that make cards that have the phrase trick or treat on them as another communication method.
Yeah, exactly. Then they can hand the card with trick or treat on it. Sometimes that's just like a little bit easier since there's a lot of moving parts with trick or treating, a lot of things to keep track of. So as we mentioned earlier, communication comes in so many different forms. So empowering your child to feel like a successful communicator is the most important thing. So what are some things we can do, or just like reminders as like if you're the person handing out candy to children on Halloween?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about some ways to support our child's communication, but communication is a two-way street. So us as the people handing out that candy on Halloween, we need to be mindful of the different types of communicators out there, and that will help children feel validated in their modality of communication, in those communication attempts. So we love visuals as speech language pathologists, but that's just a simple way to add multimodal communication. So I love the idea of taking pictures of the candy that you purchase and then just making a small core board.
Yeah, that's really good. This way then the child would have the option to either point to the type of candy or any whatever you're giving out as well. It doesn't have to be candy. And then, or they can also speak to request what they would like from your basket. So adding the visuals of trick or treat, thank you and candy on the board are also options to help give visuals to those language pieces.
Yes, yeah. And another reminder is just to present that option every time rather than a secondary option. Sometimes the communication modality that's not consistent with the one that we use, we maybe push first. So having both of those options available, you could put that core board on your front door. And this just exposes children and families to multimodal communication and just recognizes that either like pointing or speaking, they're both valued communication modalities, which they are. So what are some other reminders for that person handing out Halloween candy?
Yes, if you're as you're handing out something for Halloween, modeling communication, but you're not forcing communication. If a child's not sure what to say, you can model trick or treat and pause. And then if they don't respond or say anything, you could just model it again and provide them with whatever you're handing out. Now you're just being part of their learning journey and teaching them like what would happen in that interaction.
I love that. And you can do the same thing with that visual board. So you can point to candy or stickers and see if they make a choice. And if they don't, then you can just, point to that sticker, like look at kind of the parent or caregiver there and see if they kind of indicate maybe which one is preferred or see from their basket. Okay, stickers. And then we can hand them that sticker. And so then now they had that positive communication experience and you're modeling the way that they can communicate and just reducing that pressure around having to communicate and adhere to these Halloween communication rules. Okay, so we've trick-or-treated. Now what?
So once you're home, you can use all of that candy for sorting, labeling, or even like expanding on vocabulary. There are just so many ways to use language. You could sort by color, size, or type. Let's find all the round candies. You can even like describe the wrappers. This one's shiny. That one's bumpy. This one's brown. What else do you think you could do?
I would just talk about like if you're already eating it, kids get on that candy. So maybe this one's sweet and this one's sour, but then also focusing on those core words like open, help, it's stuck, more candy, more stickers, or spooky, scary, any more language that you can add to it.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many different opportunities there with just all of the new words that you're introducing into your home.
And then just reflecting on the experience in general. So that house was scary. I saw a big orange pumpkin. First we said trick or treat, then we got stickers. So just talking about that experience as a whole to bring that language from the outside into the home.
All right, let's recap our main takeaways. So first, preview vocabulary and practice Halloween, doing the costumes, trick-or-treating, in pretend play. Try to preview all of that first. Second, honor your child's communication modality across trick-or-treating. This might look like using choices, visuals, their AAC device, providing multiple methods for them to communicate, especially since it's new. Third, use the experience to build language. You can talk about the Halloween before, during, and after the experience. And then fourth, just have fun.
I love that. Great takeaways. Hopefully that sets you up for success as far as supporting your child across communication. And then if you're the person handing out candy, then just trying to give some other tips and reminders for being just a mindful communicator on this holiday. All right, it's time for our speech spotlight. Today, we're going to talk about building vocabulary through semantic networks.
Yes, we're going to talk about the role of semantic networks, how words are connected in the brain, and why using themes in the therapy or the classroom setting, it's not just like a trendy thing, but it's actually rooted in science.
Exactly. So let's start with the basic. What are semantic networks?
Right. So think of a semantic network like a map in the brain. It's how our brains think and organize words based on meaning. So like when a child hears the word dog, they don't just store that one word separately, right? They build connections on it. So the words bark and tail and puppy and cat, even pet, are all related and are firing up when they hear that word dog.
Yes, so I also like to think of our brain as a room. If your room had laundry spread out all over it and someone said, find the red shirt, that would feel super overwhelming. So that would probably take you a hot minute to try to find that red shirt. But if you had boxes that were labeled shirts, pants, dresses, it would take you less time to find that shirt, right? You're going to go over to the shirt box and then search for that red shirt. So if inside that box there were then smaller boxes that were labeled red, blue, and green, it would take you an even shorter amount of time to find that red shirt. So we organize words in the brain by building those connections to make it faster for us to access words.
That's a really great analogy. I like that a lot. We can organize the information into categories. So like the farm box would include cows, farmer, barn, horse, sheep, etc.
Yeah, right. And these connections aren't random. They're built through experiences, exposure, and use. So the richer and more connected to a person's semantic network it is, the easier for them to then learn and retrieve and use those words.
Right. There's like a ripple effect. It's not just on vocabulary, but then it also helps with grammar, comprehension, and reading.
Yeah, so how could we take that information that we have about what semantic networks are to help build a child's vocabulary?
Okay, so well, if you introduce vocabulary in a theme, it's funny because I think a lot of parents or people out there probably think like, oh, that like SLP always has a theme for everything. Like that's so cute. But the themes it's on purpose, right? They build meaningful connections between words. And when we teach vocabulary just by itself, like if you're just memorizing a flashcard situation, your brain doesn't know where to store it, just like we talked about that storage system in our brain. So if we introduce the vocabulary within a theme, like a farm theme, now it gives us a place to store it, gives us context and a framework.
Yeah, so instead of just learning tractor, they're also hearing barn, cow, hay, fence, and farmer. These words are all related, and those connections strengthen that semantic network in that category of farm.
Yeah, right. Like it's kind of like a spider web. The more threads you have connecting to these ideas, the stronger and stickier the learning becomes. So it's important to recognize that repeated exposure is very beneficial to strengthening those networks. For many toddlers, it takes between 10 to 20 meaningful exposures to a new word before it becomes part of their receptive vocabulary. So use that farm theme all week, target the vocabulary, keep exposing it to them in different ways, and that'll help promote generalization.
Yeah, you can also practice organizing items into categories. So you're kind of building your own theme. So from that like earlier example, you can organize by color, or you can put all the farm animals in one pile and then the ocean animals in another pile. This will help them visualize how words can go together and just create stronger maps in the brain. They're visually seeing those boxes that they're creating in their brain.
Yeah, I like that idea of sorting them out. You could also do like a compare and contrast. So like as the parent, you can model how things are the same and how they're different. Maybe they're the same color, but these animals live in different places. You could also, like for older kids, you could ask them how the objects are the same and different. And that's, again, just going to help strengthen. Now they have more networks in the brain about how things are related and also not related to each other.
Right. And with that, you can also describe a word and then have the child guess what it is. So for example, my younger kiddos, I will provide maybe 2 or 3 visuals to narrow down that field of choices to support them. But you might say, what animal is yellow with brown spots, has a long neck, and lives at the zoo? And this will help them start to connect those descriptive words to a specific object.
The answer was giraffe, right?
Yeah.
Okay, phew, got it. All right, that's a great idea. So if you're a parent, teacher, or a therapist wondering how to help kids expand on their vocabulary, here are some quick takeaways. 1, use themes and categories. They create meaningful connections in the brain. 2, expose words in context. So you want to use books, plays, songs, and conversation. Lots of exposure to those words. You could compare and contrast. How is a plane like a car? This encourages deeper thinking and more connections.
Mm-hmm.
And number 4, encourage word retrieval. So use those games like we just talked about where it challenges the child to use some of those things that they know about a word to retrieve it in their brain.
I love that. So that's a wrap on our speech spotlight. So we're going to move on over to our communication countdown. Today's communication countdown is your top 5 Halloween helpers. So these are going to be 5 different activities or toys that we think will help just expose your child to that Halloween vocabulary. So first up, we got a book, and this book is so cute. It's Pete the Cat, Trick or Pete. So Pete the Cat and his dad go knocking on different doors. So it just talks about that vocabulary of how we're going to go up to the door and say knock, knock, and then trick or treat. So great way to just expose your kiddo to that early Halloween vocabulary. Mm-hmm. Next up, we have a song. This song is called Knock Knock Trick or Treat. I think it's by Super Simple Songs. And this is just another great way to kind of practice that knocking and saying trick or treat and model that through another modality through song. What do we got for number 3?
Number 3, I will link a Halloween wristband that you could use. So sometimes bringing around an AAC device or a core board can be a little bit tricky with Halloween, especially if it's darker outside too. So wristbands are great ways to still bring along your visuals. This one has knock, knock, trick or treat, candy and bag, and thank you. So you could try that out. And I'd also recommend previewing it with your child to see if they like it on their wrist beforehand. Number 4, we have the Critter Clinic, which is basically like a little house that we always play with in speech therapy that has a bunch of doors, but I always dress mine up for Halloween with some cobwebs and some spiders and different visuals on the doors so that you can practice knock, knock, knock and trick or treat in pretend play. Mm-hmm. And then number 5, I have like a magnetic doll dress-up puzzle that has different costumes that I linked to.
Oh, cute. Yeah, a great way to just practice dressing up in a different environment and carry over that vocabulary. Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Well, thanks so much for hanging out with us today. We hope you and your little goblins have a very happy and communicative Halloween.
All right. Thank you. Like and subscribe and leave your questions in the comments. See you next time.
Bye.